Sometimes it's not the way a person dies that haunts us most, it's what they said just before. A casual remark, a cryptic goodbye, or a chilling denial can carry more weight than years of interviews or headlines. These aren't scripted lines from a movie, but the unfiltered words of real people staring straight into the unknown. Which final words will stay with you the longest? Some of these are so ordinary, they're terrifying. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, left the world with words that sound more like a lazy Sunday than a tragic goodbye. On August 16th, 1977, Elvis Presley was at Graceland, restless and unable to sleep. He turned to his fiancée, Ginger Alden, and said calmly, "I'm going to the bathroom to read." It could have been any night. No drama, no showmanship, just a private moment in a house he called home. Minutes later, Ginger found him collapsed on the bathroom floor. Despite frantic efforts, Elvis was gone at only 42. What's haunting about his last words is their sheer ordinariness. Elvis, the man who electrified audiences worldwide, whose voice reshaped music, exited with a line so simple it could belong to anyone. That contrast is what makes it unforgettable. The king didn't bow out on stage with fireworks. He whispered an everyday routine that instantly turned into a chilling finale. Heath Ledger. In January 2008, Heath Ledger seemed on the cusp of forever greatness. Fresh off filming his Oscar-winning performance as the Joker, he was the face of limitless promise. But behind the scenes, he was restless, sleepless, and leaning on medication to cope. The night before his death, his sister Kate warned him not to mix prescriptions. Heath laughed it off, replying, Katie, look, it'll be fine." Hours later, he was found unconscious in his Manhattan apartment. Gone at just 28, that single sentence meant to calm his sister is now seared into history as an eerie denial. It's heartbreaking because it was so casual, so certain. Heath didn't say goodbye. He said everything was under control, only it wasn't. His last words revealed the tragic irony of youth and brilliance colliding with fragile reality. He reassured his sister, but in doing so, gave the world a chilling echo of what was about to happen. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs wasn't a man of small vision. The Apple co-founder spent his life pushing the limits of design, technology, and imagination. But his final words weren't about iPhones, business, or achievements. In 2011, surrounded by family, Jobs looked past them, his eyes fixed on something only he could see, and said softly, "Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow." Witnesses described his tone as both astonished and calm, almost as if he was gazing at another world. Those three simple words became a mystery. Was he marveling at something beyond human comprehension, or just overwhelmed by his final moments? The beauty of it is how human and unscripted it was. For a man known for reinventing how we see technology, his final legacy was a line that stripped away all invention. Oh, wow. That's it. Pure, raw, and unforgettable. Even in death, Jobs left us wondering what he saw that we could not. Princess Diana. The world still remembers the flashing lights, the Paris tunnel, and the chaos of that night in 1997. Princess Diana's car crash shocked the globe, but few know her final words. As firefighters reached the wreckage, she was still alive, dazed and bleeding. She looked at them and whispered, "My God, what's happened?" It wasn't a polished royal statement. It wasn't even a farewell. It was a moment of confusion and disbelief, the same words anyone might say after being blindsided by disaster. Within minutes, she lost consciousness and never woke again. The haunting part isn't just what she said, but what it revealed. Diana, the people's princess, chased and hounded to her final breath, didn't rage or accuse. She simply couldn't process what had happened. Her last words echo the shock of a life cut short and a tragedy that still feels too cruel to be real. Marilyn Monroe. On August 4th, 1962, Hollywood's brightest star delivered a goodbye that was almost too cryptic to ignore. Hours before her death, Marilyn Monroe was on the phone with actor Peter Lawford. He invited her to dinner, but she declined. Her last words to him were chilling. "Say goodbye to Pat, say goodbye to Jack, and say goodbye to yourself because you're a nice guy." Lawford later admitted those words terrified him. They sounded final, like she was signing off for good. Hours later, she was found lifeless in her Los Angeles home. To this day, people debate whether it was despair, exhaustion, or something deeper. But what makes Monroe's final words unforgettable is how they carried both warmth and finality. She wasn't angry. She was saying goodbye with unsettling clarity. The screen siren who symbolized glamour left the stage not with lights and applause, but with a farewell that still raises questions. John Lennon, December 8, 1980. Outside the Dakota in New York City, fans crowded to see John Lennon after a recording session. Among them was the man who would end his life. Moments after being shot, Lennon stumbled toward the building's entrance. Blood pouring, he managed to say just 2 words. "I'm shot." It wasn't poetic. It wasn't a song lyric. It was raw, stunned recognition of what had just happened. Seconds later, he collapsed in Yoko Ono's arms and was rushed to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. For a man whose voice defined a generation, his final words were devastating in their simplicity. Lennon didn't get the chance to reflect or philosophize. Instead, his exit was stripped bare, reduced to the brutal honesty of a man realizing his fate in real time. And that is what makes it unforgettable. It wasn't just the end of a life. It was the silencing of an entire cultural movement in 2 words. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston's voice could shatter ceilings and melt hearts, but her final hours told a much darker story. On February 11, 2012, inside her Beverly Hilton hotel suite, Whitney reportedly spoke with friends and staff about her state of mind. Her last known words were simple yet eerie. "I just want to see Jesus." Hours later, she was found lifeless in her bathtub, sending shockwaves through the music world. What makes her last words so haunting is how they revealed an almost prophetic sense of finality. Whether spoken out of faith, exhaustion, or resignation, they hinted that she was already letting go. Whitney's life had been a roller coaster of soaring highs and devastating lows, but her last words pulled the curtain on everything, raw, personal, and heavy with meaning. A superstar who once commanded the world stage reduced to a line that sounded like she knew the end had come. Paul Walker. On November 30th, 2013, Paul Walker wasn't in front of a camera or racing on a movie set. He was simply attending a charity event in California. As he got into a Porsche Carrera GT with his friend Roger Rodas, he casually told others nearby, "We'll be back in 5 minutes." But they never returned. The car lost control at staggering speed, crashing and erupting in flames. Walker's final words hit hard because of how ordinary they were. He wasn't saying goodbye. He wasn't delivering a speech. He was reassuring friends that he'd be right back. Instead, his last sentence turned into a haunting timestamp. The star who lived fast on screen met the same fate off screen, with words that remind us how fragile every "see you soon" really is. Paul Walker's life ended not in a scene, but in a moment of chilling normalcy. Robin Williams. Robin Williams was the man who made millions laugh, yet carried a private storm inside. On August 11th, 2014, his wife Susan Schneider recalled his last words to her before going to bed. "Good night, my love." Tender, ordinary, and heartbreakingly simple. Hours later, he was gone. The shocking part isn't just what he said, it's what it represented. A man whose genius lit up the world ended his final day with the same quiet affection as any husband, without hinting at the storm he carried. "Good night, my love" wasn't meant to be final. It was just another nightly ritual, spoken without knowing it was his last. That's what makes it echo. Robin Williams didn't exit with a joke or a dramatic flourish, but with a line so tender it now carries the weight of finality. The man who gave so much light ended his day in the shadows, leaving the world with words that still break hearts. Chadwick Boseman. Chadwick Boseman's passing in 2020 stunned the world. Fans had no idea he'd been quietly battling cancer for years, filming blockbusters in between treatments. In his final days as his body weakened, family recalled him whispering words to center himself. Inhale, exhale. This is life. It was simple, meditative. A man staring mortality in the face and choosing presence over panic. Chadwick wasn't just an actor. He became a symbol of dignity, resilience, and grace. His final words capture that perfectly. They weren't about fear, regret, or even goodbye. They were about acceptance of the present moment, even in pain. For a man who brought Black Panther to life and inspired a generation, his last recorded words were less about death and more about what it means to live. Inhale, exhale. This is life, a reminder to every one of us that even in the end, there is beauty in breathing. Tupac Shakur, September 7th, 1996, Las Vegas. After a Mike Tyson fight, Tupac Shakur's BMW was sprayed with bullets in a drive-by shooting that shook the hip-hop world. When police reached him, they asked the dying rapper if he saw who shot him. Tupac's reply was sharp, defiant, and unforgettable. "Fuck you." That was Tupac to the end, unyielding, confrontational, and unwilling to give anyone the satisfaction of weakness. He wasn't going to name names or hand over his killers. He went out the way he lived, fighting the system, refusing to bow, even when death was minutes away. The power in those two words lies in their refusal. Most of us might plead, beg, or whisper fear. Tupac chose defiance. That's why they echo not just as his last words, but as the final punctuation mark on a life lived in rebellion. Tupac didn't just leave music behind, he left an attitude, captured perfectly in his last breath. James Brown. On Christmas morning in 2006, the godfather of soul delivered a final line that sounded more like a prediction than a goodbye. James Brown, battling pneumonia in a Georgia hospital, told his longtime friend and manager, Charles Bobbitt, "I'm going away tonight." Hours later, he was gone. There's something haunting about the confidence of those words. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was certainty. Brown, whose energy on stage felt unstoppable, somehow knew his last curtain call was approaching. For a man who defined funk, soul, and rhythm, his final words were quiet but powerful. They weren't about music. They were about destiny. Fans remember James Brown for his fire, his sweat, and his scream. But his final words prove he was just as commanding in silence. "I'm going away tonight." A final performance without instruments, leaving only his voice echoing across time. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, had spent decades under pressure, and in 2009, his return tour, This Is It, was meant to be redemption. But his last words, spoken to Dr. Conrad Murray, revealed a man desperate for rest. He said, "Just make me sleep. Doesn't matter what time I wake up." Those words are bone-chilling because of their innocence. He wasn't asking for glory, attention, or escape. He was asking for something most of us take for granted: sleep. Hours later, he was gone after receiving a fatal dose of propofol. Michael Jackson's entire career had been a struggle between the demands of superstardom and the needs of a fragile human being. His last words captured that perfectly. He didn't fade away in a stadium or on stage. He slipped into silence trying to find peace. For the man who made the world dance, the most shocking part is how ordinary his final request was. Crawford Hollywood's silver screen legend Joan Crawford was never known for being soft-spoken. Even on her deathbed in 1977, she stayed true to form. As her housekeeper knelt at her side and began to pray aloud, Joan interrupted with her final words, "Don't you dare ask God to help me." That line shocked everyone present, but it was classic Crawford, fierce, independent, and unwilling to let anyone else dictate her story, even at the very end. Some call it bitter, others call it defiant, but there's no question it was pure Joan. She didn't want pity, and she certainly didn't want anyone speaking for her. In a way, those words summed up her entire Hollywood career. She battled studios, fought for her image, and controlled her narrative until her last breath. While some stars fade out quietly, Crawford roared against the silence, leaving the world with a line as sharp as her on-screen glare. Bob Marley's music carried messages of freedom, unity, and resilience. But when cancer finally overtook him in 1981, his last words were delivered not to a crowd, but to his son Ziggy. He told him, "Money can't buy life." It's a simple truth, but coming from Marley, it hits like poetry. Here was a man who had fame, influence, and global recognition. Yet his final lesson was about the limits of all of it. Money, success, adoration, none of it could buy him another day. Those 5 words became an echo of his philosophy, stripped down to its rawest form. Marley left the world the way he lived in it, speaking truth, even in the darkest moment. For a man who gave so much music and hope, his last words became the ultimate reminder that life is priceless, and nothing, not even fortune, can purchase more time. Frank Sinatra. For decades, Frank Sinatra was the definition of cool. He sang about love, heartbreak, and living life his way. But when his time came in 1998, his last words were far from romantic. Surrounded by his wife and family in a Los Angeles hospital, Sinatra whispered, "I'm losing." It's chilling because it stripped away the swagger. For once, the man who seemed untouchable admitted defeat. There was no show, no croon, no bravado, just raw honesty. Sinatra's voice had once filled arenas, but his last words were spoken in barely a breath. And maybe that's what makes them so unforgettable. After a lifetime of winning audiences, awards, and admiration, his final statement wasn't about legacy, it was about reality. The man who sang My Way ended not with triumph, but with the quiet. Acknowledgement that even legends cannot outrun the inevitable. Kurt Cobain. The voice of a generation left words behind that still ignite debate. In April 1994, Nirvana's frontman Kurt Cobain penned a note that ended with, "It's better to burn out than to fade away." It wasn't a line he created, it came from Neil Young, but Cobain made it his own. Those words captured the chaos and contradiction of his short life. He hated fame, yet couldn't escape it. He craved authenticity, yet felt consumed by pressure. "Better to burn out than to fade away" has since been quoted endlessly, sometimes misused, but always haunting. Whether you see it as defiance, exhaustion, or resignation, it became the final lyric of his story. For fans, it's painful because it feels too perfect, too cinematic, almost as if written for history. But that's the tragedy. Cobain's rawness, his pain, and his genius were wrapped up in that final line, leaving us to wonder if he meant it literally or if the world forced it to be so. Anna Nicole Smith. Anna Nicole Smith lived her life in the spotlight, and her death in 2007 was no different. In her final hours, friends recalled her lying in bed, exhausted, murmuring, "You know, I'm really tired." Hours later, she was found unresponsive in her Florida hotel suite. Her last words may sound ordinary, but in context, they're haunting. Anna Nicole had endured scandal, loss, and endless tabloid coverage. "I'm really tired" wasn't just about needing rest. It felt like a lifetime of weariness condensed into one line. For someone who had been painted as a caricature by the media, her final words revealed the human underneath. No spotlight, no performance, just honesty. She was tired, and for the world, that made her exit feel even more tragic. Sometimes the most shocking last words aren't the dramatic ones. They're the ones that sound like something you've said yourself, but will never say again. Chester Bennington. The Linkin Park frontman spent his life pouring pain into anthems that spoke to millions. In 2017, those closest to Chester Bennington revealed his final message to a friend: "I can't do this anymore." Hours later, the rock world was shattered by news of his death. Those words cut deep because of their honesty. Chester had given everything through his music, his screams, his lyrics, his raw vulnerability. Fans who found comfort in his songs now saw that same torment in his final words. They weren't just personal, they became universal. Everyone who has ever felt overwhelmed, exhausted, or cornered could hear themselves in that line. For a man whose voice had become the soundtrack of resilience for so many, his last words revealed just how heavy his own burden had been. They echo painfully, a reminder that even those who inspire us sometimes cannot escape their own storms. Queen Elizabeth II. In September 2022, the world paused as Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest reigning monarch, reached her final hours. Reports from Balmoral Castle revealed her last recorded words to staff were understated yet poignant. "It's been lovely." For someone who carried the weight of a nation for 70 years, those words captured her trademark restraint. No drama, no confession. Just a quiet farewell, as if she were closing a chapter rather than ending a life. That's what makes them resonate. After decades of public duty, constant scrutiny, and monumental change, her last words weren't about crowns or history. They were about simplicity. "It's been lovely" could describe an afternoon tea, but instead it became the epitaph of a queen. It wasn't theatrical, but that's precisely why it struck the world. Sometimes the most powerful last words are not grand, but graceful. Michael Landon. Michael Landon, the beloved star of Bonanza and Little House on the Prairie, faced pancreatic cancer with the same strength he showed on screen. In July 1991, surrounded by his family at his Malibu home, his final words were, "You're right. It's time. I love you all." What makes those words unforgettable is their acceptance. Landon didn't fight against the inevitable. He embraced it with love and honesty. For a man who played so many strong, fatherly figures, his last words showed that same protective spirit, reassuring his family even as he slipped away. There was no fear, only calm. Fans remember Landon for his iconic roles, but his family remembers a man who left them with closure. His goodbye wasn't for the cameras, it was for them, and that makes it even more powerful. Some stars fade in chaos, but Landon chose peace, wrapping his final curtain call in love. Amy Winehouse. Amy Winehouse was a force of talent, her voice carrying both soul and sorrow. In July 2011, just hours before her death in London, her bodyguard recalled checking in on her. When he asked how she was, Amy's reply was simple and chilling. "I don't want to die." For a woman who had lived under relentless media attention, those words stripped everything down to raw humanity. She wasn't the rebel with the beehive hair and powerhouse voice. She was just a young woman at 27, scared and vulnerable. It's heartbreaking because it showed she wasn't ready, even though the world had braced for tragedy. Amy Winehouse's final words echo as a plea we all understand. They remind us that behind the music, behind the headlines, she was human, and her story ended far too soon. Her voice still plays, but her last words reveal the fragile truth behind the legend. Patrick Swayze. Patrick Swayze fought pancreatic cancer for nearly 2 years with resilience and grit. Known for roles in Dirty Dancing and Ghosts, Swayze became a symbol of strength. In September 2009, with his wife Lisa Nemi by his side, his final words to her were, "I love you." It's the most classic phrase in the world, but coming from Swayze, it meant everything. He, Teeter, had lived a Hollywood life of glamour and fame. But when the end came, he didn't cling to roles or applause. He focused on love. That's what makes those words so moving. They were not grand, but they were perfect. For a man remembered as both a heartthrob and a fighter, his final statement cut through all the noise. "I love you." Simple, eternal, the ultimate goodbye, spoken to the person who mattered most. Sometimes the most shocking thing about last words is how tender they can be. John Belushi. John Belushi was comedy chaos in human form, a tornado of energy who lit up Saturday Night Live in the big screen. But in 1982, that fire burned out at just 33. On his last night, Belushi was with friends when he looked at them and said, "Just don't leave me alone tonight." Those words sound casual, almost needy, until you realize they were his last. Hours later, he was gone, found in a Los Angeles bungalow. Belushi's final words sting because they cut through his wild image and show something more vulnerable: fear of being left alone. For a man who made the world laugh, his last request was heartbreakingly human. He didn't want to be left behind. In the end, Belushi's story wasn't about jokes or fame. It was about the loneliness that even the brightest stars sometimes feel in their darkest hours. Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, Britain's bulldog during World War II, was known for his fiery speeches and iron will. But when his time came in 1965, his last words shocked those around him. After a stroke left him bedridden, Churchill muttered, "I'm bored with it all." It was blunt, dismissive, almost humorous in its own way. The man who rallied nations, who stared down tyranny, left the world not with drama, but with weariness. Some see those words as cynical, others as strangely fitting. Churchill had lived through wars, politics, and endless battles of will. By the end, perhaps nothing impressed him anymore. His last words cut through history with dry wit, showing that even the greatest figures can exit with a shrug. I'm bored with it all. A curtain call that was equal parts shocking and oddly Churchillian. Last words have a way of sticking with us. They can be ordinary, defiant, tender, or downright chilling, but they always remind us of one thing. We never know which sentence will be our last. From Elvis's casual bathroom remark to Churchill's weary dismissal, these moments are frozen in time. Which one hit you hardest? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who loves untold stories. And don't forget to subscribe for more voices that still echo long after the silence.